by the way. Go Colts. I grabbed some questions from my YouTube channel and I summarized it down to basically 1 or 2 sentences. And so we'll go through this real fast Q&A. If you have any questions that you want me to answer on the next live, just put it underneath this video. Okay. Question 1. My autistic spouse says, if you want something, just tell me. But I don't want to have to tell him everything. Am I asking too much? Well, I don't want you to have to tell him everything either. But a lot of times the ASD brain is really not great at mind reading or heart reading. In other words, knowing what you're thinking and how you're feeling. You as the NT may be very intuitive and can figure that stuff out. He's not going to figure it out, assuming that you're the NT wife and he's the ASD husband. So I would say that if there's something that you need him to do that's important, not everything's important, right? Let's come up with a scale 1 to 5. 1, 2, get to it when you get to it. 4s and 5s, it's really important, okay? So when your to-do list hits a number 4 or 5, I think it would be good to say, hey, on our little scale 1 to 5 here, this is a 4, and I need you to do this. So you don't have to tell him everything. Scale of 1 to 5, 1 is low priority, 5 is high. When you have something that's a 4 or 5, then let him know, get him on the same page with the scale. Hey, this is a 4, so he'll know, okay, this is pretty important. And then just tell him what you need him to do. Okay, just tell him, yeah. Number 2, why does my autistic spouse want to argue about tiny details when I'm trying to talk about my feelings? Okay, well, you need to talk to somebody about your feelings. That's important. You can talk to him about your feelings, but I don't think you're going to solve any problems with that. I'm assuming you're the NT, when you talk about feelings to maybe another neurotypical, that's a meaningful conversation. But if you're talking to somebody who has some emotions blindness, talking alexithymia, then talking about your feeling is not going to be very meaningful to your ASD spouse, not because they don't care about how you feel, but because they don't know what they're supposed to do based on how you feel. And why does he argue tiny details? They're not tiny to him. They might seem tiny to you. So I'm not sure what to do with that. I would just say that the details are important to him. And so if you want him to listen to your feelings, maybe listen to his tiny details. Question 3, my spouse says they love me, but I don't feel loved. Which one of us is right? I would say both of you are right. Your ASD spouse shows his love by doing things for you. Now, I know that's not good enough for the NTs. The neurotypicals want the deep emotional connection, and why wouldn't you? That's understandable. ASD spouses tend not to know what to do with deep emotional connection. Again, we're back to alexithymia, mind blindness. So even though this may not be enough for you as the neurotypical, think of all the things that your ASD spouse does for you, because that's the way that that spouse shows love. Number 4, why does my autistic partner seem perfectly calm when I'm falling apart? I think we're right back to alexithymia again. It's not like he sees your pain and just doesn't care. I know that sounds weird for the neurotypicals to hear. How can he not see my pain? I'm over there crying. Okay, well, I know it would seem painfully obvious to the intuitive brain, but to someone who has some mind blindness and emotions blindness, they don't really understand the emotionality going on. Also, the ASD individual tends to be very self-sufficient, autonomous, independent, and so your ASD spouse may just assume that you're going to take care of it on your own because he would take care of it on his own, assuming this is an NT wife and ASD husband, which I understand the inverse can be the case as well. Why can my spouse remember obscure facts from 20 years ago but forget something I told them yesterday? Okay, well, we have long-term memory that's intact, short-term memory that's not so much intact. We also have stuff that falls on the ASD spouse's agenda that's easily worked into working memory. Most of the stuff that you want him or her to do, as you being the NT, the other person being the ASD, most of the stuff that is important to you is not important to the ASD spouse. The ASD spouse has a very small agenda bucket, very small. And almost everything that was on your agenda is outside of that bucket. And so when something's not on my agenda, easy to forget. My spouse says I'm too emotional. Am I? I don't know. I don't know. You might be underly emotional to somebody else. You might be overly emotional to somebody who views emotions as dangerous and messy and getting in the way of completing tasks and confusing. Number 7, why does every disagreement turn into a debate? Well, ASD individuals are big on presenting facts. They're big on telling the brutal truth according to them. Many ASD individuals feel like they are the keepers of the truth. We're talking about problems with perspective taking and mind blindness now. It's hard for them to see somebody else's perspective. So if I have ASD, I'm only going to see my perspective. And if I only see my perspective, then other perspectives are irrelevant and they don't even exist. My truth is the only truth that exists. Okay? So, and it goes a little worse than that. If I'm the ASD spouse and I only see my truth and I present my truth to you, the NT, and you disagree with me, as the ASD spouse, I'm probably thinking, because you disagree with me, therefore you're against me. And so it does turn into a debate. Going to defend the truth to the end of the earth. Question 8, my autistic partner needs a lot of alone time. Oh, really? Imagine that. How do I know whether it's regulation or avoidance? First of all, why would you care? I would say it's regulation if they come back. You know, they've had, I don't know, 30 minutes, we'll say, of decompression time, and on a scale of 1 to 5, 5's the bullets already left the gun, 1, they're calm, they get down to 1, and then they feel okay coming back. If your autistic partner needs a lot of alone time and they never come back, right? They don't give you the exit script. Hey, I'm a little dysregulated, I'll be over here and I'll come back later after I'm calm. But they never come back. You know, he takes off, shuts down, and he's gone for the rest of the day. I've had some NT spouses say that sometimes the ASD spouse is AWOL for 3 or 4 days. So if the spouse never comes back, I think it's safe to say that's avoidance. Question 9, why does my partner act normal 5 minutes after a huge argument? Probably because he's already discharged a bunch of negative pent-up energy. Anger is basically the behavior that you see. Anxiety is underneath that behavior of anger. And so it's typical for the ASD spouse to explode, discharge all that cortisol and adrenaline, and so he can get back in the parasympathetic nervous system mode, back into the prefrontal cortex from the hindbrain, once he's gone off on somebody. Think of it like a pressure cooker that explodes. It doesn't explode over the course of 30 minutes. It's a few seconds and it's done. Of course, everybody else in the house is traumatized for a few days, but he's okay now. Or maybe it's a she. How do I get my spouse to understand how lonely I've been? We're back to emotions blindness again. You're saying, how can I get a blind man to see? I'm not calling your ASD spouse dumb. He's probably, general IQ wise, he's probably smarter than me. But trying to get somebody to see, in this case, how lonely you are, is like, how can I get an emotionally blind person to see? I have some methods for that in the ASD. I have an ASD men's group, and we talk about social skills, cultivating some emotional literacy in that group. But that's a whole course, and I won't have time to do that today. But hey, email me, mbhutton@gmail.com. Number 11, can an autistic person become more emotionally available? Yes. Having joined my group, I know that sounds like a commercial. That's the fast track. There's not too many people that do what I do, unfortunately, online. I have 3 men's groups and some NTY's groups. I'll put the links in the description area. But the answer is yes, absolutely yes. We're talking about neuroplasticity. Even an autistic brain can take full advantage of neuroplasticity, laying down new neural pathways, in this case, learning social skills and developing some emotional vocabulary. The ASD brain doesn't care whether that person has learned how to fly a plane, bake a cake, or develop some emotional skills, okay? So, yes. Number 12, my spouse says, that's not what I meant. Does intention matter if I was still hurt? Yes. So to the ASD spouses listening, instead of saying that's not what I meant, and then that's the end of it, throw a little extra in there, which would be this. And I'm going to give you a script, and this is going to acknowledge intent and impact, okay? So to the ASD spouses, instead of saying, well, that's not what I meant, and then you're done with it, try this, okay? That wasn't my intention to hurt you. We'll use that as an example. But I see it hurt you anyway. I'm sorry, is there anything I can do now to help? So in many cases, when the spouse says that's not what I meant, that's truly not what they meant. There's 90 times out of 10, if not 19 times out of 20, there's no malicious intent there. But to the ASD spouses listening, just because it wasn't your intent, that doesn't mean they weren't hurt. So say, wasn't my intent. I see it hurt anyway. What can I do now to help? Sorry. That's a repair statement. 13, why does my spouse get defensive every time I bring up a problem? Because every time you bring up a problem, he views that as I'm the problem, okay? You could be talking about the kids aren't doing their homework and he was supposed to be, or something totally unrelated to him. Whenever the NT brings up a problem, she's trying to problem solve. This isn't an attack. The NT's not purposely on a campaign to shame and blame, but the ASD spouse whose self-esteem is already below the toilet views any presentation of a problem as, oh, so you're saying that I am the problem. So whenever you bring up a problem, he downloads that as I'm the problem. Question 14, how do I know when I'm asking for reasonable change versus asking my autistic partner to mask? Well, asking your autistic partner to mask is, I don't know why anybody would want to do that. So let's just don't ask the autistic partner to mask ever. How do I know when I'm asking for reasonable change? Reasonable, how do you define reasonable? And what kind of change are you wanting? Let's think of the prominent traits of ASD that get in the way. Mind blindness, emotions blindness, executive function deficits, anxiety, and sensory sensitivities. So if you're trying to get the spouse to change, and I know this is not a great answer for you because it's a little too vague. If there's some mind blindness involved, emotions blindness involved, executive functions involved, sensory sensitivities involved, anxiety involved, then it might be a bit unreasonable. Mind blindness is, I don't understand why you think the way you do. Emotions blindness is, I don't understand why you feel the way you do. Executive function deficits, there are many. Working memory, emotional regulation, and so on. Sensory sensitivities, I don't need to describe that, you know what that is. And those 4 right there cause number 5, which is anxiety. So do some research on the traits, those 5 traits. And if you think your request for change is going to involve him or her to give up one of those 5 traits, it's probably unreasonable. If there's none of those 5 factors involved, then I would say it's very reasonable. Schedule a call with me. Link will be below. Number 15, after everything we've been through, can a neurodiverse marriage actually become good again? Yeah, it sounds like I'm promoting groups again, but I have to because there's just not too many people doing coaching online for neurodiverse couples. I'm not particularly smart or particularly special. There's just not too many of us around. So at the risk of turning this into a commercial, I have groups. I'll put the link in the description area. I do one-on-ones on Zoom, description area. Self-help strategies for the ASD partner, forget it. You as the NT trying to help, forget it. You wouldn't be asking these questions or watching this video right now if your method worked. The ASD spouse and the NT spouse need to find some outside resource. That resource needs to be somebody who has some expertise in ASD in the context of the neurodiverse marriage. There's all kinds of things that can be done, absolutely, but I need to pick his brain and I need to pick your brain. So anyway, there's going to be links in the description area. I'll probably do this, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, the Q&A. If you have a question for me for the next time I do this, put it underneath this video. I'm out.